God. So now we're at Genesis 37, if you'll turn there, and this is called Mighty Joe Young. Mighty Joe Young, okay? That's what it's called. And if you know that reference, that's fine. It's about a big ape, big monkey. But I called it Mighty Joe Young because this is the story of Joseph when he's a young man. And he is a mighty person. He does what's right, and he goes through some struggles, but maintains his integrity. So he is mighty in the Lord. So Genesis 37, and we'll read a couple verses and get along with it. Genesis 37. And we'll try and get it all done, but I have written a lot, and it's a good-sized chapter. And it says, in verse 1 of Genesis 37, and Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. So, we have a little bit of a tattler, Joseph is. But is that really what he's doing? Because we're going to discuss that. So what's a tattletale? Sometimes people don't know when someone's tattling, like, hey, like if Priya gets hit by Traeger every single time, she's got to come running down, crying and sobbing. It's like, okay, you just need to like back away and handle these situations yourself. Okay, 4-year-old? But that's a type of tattling. But then there's the type of telling on somebody, right? When they're really doing wrong and discretion is not appropriate. Things need to be revealed, right? The Bible calls a person a tattler, like in 1 Timothy, talking about all the single ladies going from house to house and tattling on each other, basically. That's a type of tattling, putting people's dirty laundry out there for everybody to see. And another synonym in the Bible is you find that in Proverbs, it's talebearer. Okay, a talebearer. And talebearers, they were a revealer of secrets because they just got nothing better to do. Their lives aren't as interesting as everybody else's, and so they got to tell everybody else's stories, including, of course, the negative stuff. But what about when someone needs to be told on? There is a time for that too. And Joseph apparently saw something that wasn't arbitrary or benign going on. It was an evil report. What were they doing? And further in the story, you'll see actually something happening with these brothers where they're supposed to be doing this job, but they're not. And they have this habit of being like, okay, go do this. Jacob sends them to go do a job, and they blow it off, right? So it's an evil report. And sometimes maybe at my job or something like that, yeah, maybe something isn't doing something totally right. I'm not going to tell on everybody, but it's something really bad is going on, dangerous. Maybe there's like substance abuse on the job. That's a time to tattle. Okay, that's a time to reveal a secret because it's putting people in danger, and it's wasting the boss's money as well. And if you care about those things, God will see your heart and give you favor at work, I believe, even though you might receive some persecution with that as well. And sometimes, like I said, people have trouble discerning when it's time to tell and when it isn't, and to have discretion when to reveal a thing, And I talked about this a little bit ago, not putting people's dirty laundry out there. I've talked about this before, gossiping. The Bible, though, is actually pretty specific on what sins to reveal. It's pretty specific. Like, don't walk with brothers that walk disorderly. Okay, that's in 2 Thessalonians. Okay, don't walk with brothers that walk disorderly. Let's turn to one other passage. Let's turn to 1 Corinthians 5. If you get bookmarked there in Genesis 37. And go to 1 Corinthians 5. And this isn't this isn't just like these are the sins and only these sins. This is just a grouping of sins together that Paul thought like, hey, if any man is called a brother, don't hang out with this person if they're doing these things. So, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 9. And we'll read just to verse 11. And it says in chapter 5 of verse 9 of 1 Corinthians, I wrote unto you in an epistle not to company with fornicators, okay? And then he says this, yet not altogether with the fornicators of this world, meaning unsaved people that just, they're just doing what they think they know is best, They don't know any better. Or with the covetous or extortioners, with idolaters. For then must ye needs go out of the world. You need to live on the moon. You need to live on Mars, okay? That's how you get away from those things. But then you just have yourself to deal with, okay? But now I have written unto you, not to verse 11, but now I have written unto you not to keep company if any man that is called a brother. That doesn't even mean it's just a saved person. He just says he's a saved person, right? He's just at the church a lot. He's calling himself a brother. He's taking the name of Christ as his own, right? You don't know the heart, of course, but he's just saying he's calling himself a brother. If they be a fornicator, covetous, idolater, a railer, which is giving unsubstantiated evidence and accusatorily. Like, you don't believe anything in the Bible. Okay, well, where's the evidence for this? This sounds just like a rail or something like that. Like, you're just casting out accusations with no evidence. A drunkard, which we all know what that is, and that accounts for any type of abuse of any substance, by the way. God doesn't need to label heroin or methamphetamine. He just needs drunkard, okay? Perfect. An idolater, right? An extortioner, with such as one, no, not to eat. Why is that? Because we just want to be mean bullies? No, because these people need to have some shame brought in their life, because shame is an ingredient for change, like it or not. Our world doesn't like that idea, but God does like the idea of being shamed, so you change when it comes to these certain types of things. And like I said, in 2 Thessalonians 3, it talks about walking disorderly, and that can mean all sorts of things. Like a good example in my head, it says not to walk with brothers that walk disorderly is like maybe they're really bad at the job at work. They don't listen to the boss. They're just always cutting the corners, and they balk at authority or something like that. That's someone that you don't want to hang around, okay? Even if they are a Christian, it's just a bad influence, okay? You don't want to have a toxic empathy for a person like that. Like, I'm just going to hang around you just regardless if you're a really bad influence on me and my family. You don't want to hang out. That's toxic empathy. You don't want to have that type of wrong empathy, right? But, if someone is at fault, you're a mature person in the spirit, you go up to them, you try and help them. But if they don't want to hear you, hey, a heretic after the first and second hearing, you reject those persons if they don't want to change. You just let them go their own way. Satan have you, okay? That's what Paul teaches in a nutshell. But Joseph brothers had an evil report. Now, perhaps Joseph, I don't believe he was tattling. I believe Joseph was just probably a good kid. He's a good kid. That's why his dad loves him. Okay, and his brothers have actually proven to be have some wicked tendencies, like Levi and Simeon genociding a town of males. Okay, for defiling their daughter their sister Dinah. Sorry. And then you got Judah in the next chapter. He does weird stuff with prostitutes. It's like, why? And then you have Reuben all of a sudden just laying with Bilhah. Okay. His father's concubine. So these other kids don't really have a good report. It's an evil report. And Joseph sees these things as a 17-year-old, and he wants to tell Dad. But none of the boys have anything bad to say about Joseph. And they hate him for it, okay? Oh, Dad loves you the most. Well, why is that, Reuben? Why is that, Judah? Why is that, Levi and Simeon? Maybe because they're not crazy idiots, okay? He's not a crazy idiot like you who goes sin and doesn't obey Dad, doesn't obey authority. He's doing everything right, and that's why he has favor, right? That should be an inspiration for you to change, and you feel shame, and then you get it right. So they envy Joseph. Because let's face it, people at work, let's say you go to a place and everybody's doing the job poorly. Like, no one's doing it right, but you come in, Mr. Goody Two-Shoes, right? You go in there and you start doing everything right. You're cleaning everything. You're obeying the rules, right? You're making everything efficient. You make everybody look bad. Well, what's that? What do those people just crowd around you, high five you? No, they don't. They typically don't like it because you're changing the status quo of doing everything, subpar. But be not weary in well-doing. You know, sometimes a Christian can go into a situation like that, whether it be at work or wherever it is, and, you know, you get weary because people are just hounding you for doing the right thing. But, you know, the Lord sees that in you, and he says that's acceptable. That's acceptable when you're doing right and people are hounding you. That's an acceptable thing to the Lord. You could say this, he's a proud parent, okay, when he sees you doing that type of thing. And, you know, maybe that's not the best word to use, but you know what I mean. But God does have his children that he delights in and gives great blessings to, right? Because they follow him. And then, you know, they have the children that aren't so well behaved, that God still loves, but they're out of church, they're living in sin, they hear the truth, they reject it, they don't want to, they want to live amongst the thorns of the world, let that stuff grow in their life instead of feeding God, feeding the new man, they feed the flesh all their lives. And then they're under a curse from God. And I tell you what, if you're a Christian and you're in church and then you leave, you're not under the blessing of God. You're not. You're under the curse of God. God is mad at you for not being in the house of God. It's point blank fact. Now, do I believe Jacob was wrong for giving Joe a nice coat? Now, I just think if I gave like one of my kids a nice coat and nobody else got one, they got hand-me-down Goodwill stuff, which is fine. That's what I'm wearing. But one of them got like, I don't know, a Nike. Is that like super good? That's not even that good. Gucci or whatever. Carhartt. Carhartt's not that bad. But at least if it's good, if it's worth what you're paying for. But anyway, if Joe earned it, though, fine. If Joe earned it. But, you know, you can see how that would cause some strife. And they hate Joseph because he's the good little two-shoe boy. He's the gold child. Let's read on. Let's go back to Genesis 37 and read some more. Read some more here. Verse 5. This is where Joseph just gets, you know, he's just, okay, Joseph. Okay, this is where we see where his brothers are like, whatever, man. Verse 5. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren. Big mistake, and they hated him yet the more. Okay? And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood around about and made obeisance to my sheaf. Yeah, that's a really good thing to tell your brothers that don't like you already. And verse 8, and his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. So if you wanted to tick your siblings off, this is a great way to pull it off right here. Great way to do it. But it wasn't just some silly dream. This was actually a prophecy from God. Because if you know this story, what happens? Joseph rises to great authority in Egypt because of doing well and thinking of God and God being with him, because he's a righteous person living a righteous life, doing his best. And what do his brothers do? They come there and they kind of got to do obeisance to him in a manner of speaking. It's actually a vision from God. And this brings up a great lesson in life. And, you know, I'm trying to connect this here. But I thought about this while reading this portion of the scripture, is that there will always be a leader. There will always be a really smart guy. There will always be a person that has a lot of responsibility, and it might not be you. Right? It might not be you. There might be a good-looking person. There might be an athletic person. There might be a wealthy person, all those things. Titles. Funny, might be a really funny guy. And those are good things, but someone has to fill those slots. And it's not always going to be you, right? And it's wrong to envy people because they have a type of position and just for that fact. That's wrong. Okay? If you want a position like that, you should earn it, right? And not just sit there in an envy pity pot, woe is me, because I'm not in that position. And you want to detach yourself from eyeing up people and the way they're living their life and being what? Covetous. You don't want to be covetous because even though that's a common thing found in the Bible, it is a rot to the soul and heart and mind of a Christian. Because you're not focusing on yourself and your own growth. You're looking at other people and you're getting envious. And what's that cause? Strife and contention, because you're not trying to do things the right way. You're trying to bring people down instead of being happy for those people and then inspiring to be better yourself. That's how you're supposed to do it. It stunts Christian growth. Even in the secular world, it stunts growth. 2 Corinthians 10 says this, 10:12. It says this, "For we dare not make ourselves of the number," or don't be counted, "to compare ourselves with some that commend themselves, but they measuring themselves by themselves, comparing themselves among themselves, are not wise." That's a lots of themselves there, so I'm going to try and break it down. Don't be counted with those people who get caught up in the game of boasting against one another. Don't be caught up in that. It doesn't get anywhere. It doesn't create stronger bonds between friendships or anybody. It just creates strife. And let's say you hear somebody saying like, "Oh, I'm so good at my job, genius really, all my titles and my trophies." Don't feel envious. You know what I feel when I hear someone doing that about themselves? Embarrassed for them. I feel embarrassed, like, man, just shut up. What are you doing? You just think you're just telling everybody how good you are, and you think everybody's just like, oh, yeah, sycophants maybe, okay? Maybe you're flattering fans that aren't really your friends. But the real people are like, man, this guy's a joke, okay? It happens at work. It happens all over the place, and people just can't get enough of gloating about themselves, and it's embarrassing. Don't be envious of those people. Don't covet what they have. Do what you can do. Let other people do what they can do. Because remember, we're a body. Does the cell, the small little single cell in your body, boast against the heart? Okay? You ever seen a 3D printing or a 3D vision of a cell and what's happening inside the cell with the ribosome and the mitochondria? It's a miracle of God. It really is. It's a small little city in there. Okay? It's a miracle of God. So why would the cell boast against the heart? It's got a pretty important job, pretty complicated job. Focus on you. Focus on what you're doing, and don't be so entangled with other people's achievements that you just can't even be around them. Oh, they're so good at what they do. No, just be better yourself. You get better. Rather be glad there is a heart. Be glad there is a cell. Verse 9. We're done with biology. "And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon, and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him, and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying." So his dream takes the cake, this dream does, because now he's not just implicating the brothers, he's implicating mom and dad too, because, son, dad, mom, moon. And Jacob, though, he's had visions of God. And so he's taking things into consideration. Yeah, he rebuked him maybe in the flesh, but then he's thinking about it like, man, he's had 2 of these dreams now. This kind of feels like something that God's telling him, right? But the dream was just the last straw for the brothers. They just couldn't handle this. Verse 12 to 20. Let's read a good chunk here. "And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, Here am I. And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And a man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, They are departed hence, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit. And we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. All right, so we got the conspiracy to kill Joseph here. It gets pretty serious. So if you pay attention here, I believe you see a pretty clear picture of the crucifixion. You see a pretty clear picture of the cross here. We have Joe's brothers, okay, which I picture is a great picture of the nation of Israel at the time of Christ, okay, at the time of Christ. Jacob sends Joseph, right, to see what his brethren are up to. Are they feeding the flocks? Is that not what God did for Israel when he sent Jesus? Hey, I want you to go down here and you're going to see how they're doing. Remember the parable of the vineyard in Matthew 21. The parable of the vineyard, what is it? God had a vineyard with a tower, he set up husbandmen. What is that? That's Israel over this heritage, right? And then he sends people, which are prophets, to to go and check on them. And what do? They kill them, they stone them, they slay some, they persecute them. That's what they did to the prophets when they were in wickedness, right? But then God's like, I'll send my son. They'll reverence my son. What did they do to his son? They killed him. Okay? So that parable, and in this story, you can see how this is relating to how Jesus was sent to go to Israel. Are they feeding the flock? No, they killed them. Okay? They wanted to, inherit what was the sons, and so they killed him. No, we'll take his inheritance for ourselves. In Isaiah 49:6, a prophecy of Christ here, and he said, this is God, and God said, it is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob, and to restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles, and thou mayest be my salvation unto the end of the earth. And this is quoted dynamically, of course, but it's quoted in Acts 13:47 when Paul and Barnabas had enough of the unbelieving Jews and their persecution, and they're trying to steer Gentiles away from the gospel. And he says, you know what? We're just going to go on to the Gentiles because you guys have chosen to be unworthy of everlasting life, and so they go to the Gentiles. That's Paul and Barnabas in Acts 13. But when Jesus comes to Jerusalem in the New Testament, does he find them feeding the flocks like they were supposed to? No, they were in Dothan. They were in Dothan. They weren't obeying their father. They were in Dothan enjoying their father's money, okay? Eating at a nice fancy restaurant or something like that and having some drink. That's what they were doing. They had no intention of following what their father had told them to do. But Joseph finds a man wandering in the field, right? And he basically tells on his brothers for abandoning the job, says, oh yeah, they went to Dothan. But doesn't that remind you of John the Baptist, who was preaching in the wilderness? Okay? Setting up the path, right? And when his brothers see Joseph afar off, in verse 18, they conspired to kill him. And why did they want to kill him? Just because they're mean? No, because it's envy. And why did the Pharisees and Sadducees want to kill Jesus? What did Pilate say? They knew it. He knew it because it was for envy. He was doing all these miracles. He was forgiving sin, which was blasphemous to them because they didn't understand what the Son of God was because they were unsaved. And they were preaching a false religion of righteousness by the law and not by faith. They were trying to establish their own righteousness instead of submitting themselves to the righteousness of God. That's how you get saved all the time. Okay? So just as we see when Jesus is performing all these miracles and people are believing upon him, in John 11:53, it says, then from that day forth they took counsel together to put him to death. Okay, they conspired just like Joseph's brothers conspired against him. And right before that passage in John 11, it says there's a high priest at that time called Caiaphas, right? And what's he do? He speaks by the Holy Ghost and says these, where he's like in this council, and all of a sudden he's like defending Jesus, and they're all looking at him like, what are you talking about, Caiaphas? We got to kill this guy, right? But he says this, ye know nothing at all, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not, and not for that nation only, but that also ye should gather together therein one, the children of God, that were scattered abroad. Okay? So Caiaphas there, that resembles Reuben right here. Let's read a little bit more. Verse 21. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that it is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of the hands to deliver him from his father again. So basically, he's like, just put him in the pit, and then later Reuben was going to sneak off and get him out of the pit and return him to Jacob. So Reuben wants to save Joseph from his wicked brothers and give him back to his father. Just as Caiaphas, even though through the Holy Ghost, tries to sway, although by the inspiration of the Holy Ghost, to save Jesus from being destroyed. Okay? So that's kind of another resemblance there. And in these last verses, verse 23 and 24, a glaring picture of the murder of Jesus Christ by his brethren. 23, 24. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat. What's that remind me of? When they ripped that purple cloak off Jesus, right? They stripped him of his cloak because he is a king. And it came to pass when Joseph was coming to his brethren that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him, and they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. No chance for survival if you're left in here, okay? There's no chance for survival. No food, no water, you'll die in 2 days. So, Joseph didn't die. They had a change of heart in their story, right? And they decide, hey, you know what, we should actually go and just like get him and sell him to like the Ishmaelites or something like that. That's what Judah's idea was. We'll read in here. Let's read on actually, 25 through 26. And they sat down to eat bread after they'd just done ditching Joseph in this pit. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it that if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let now our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and his brethren were content. Then there passed by Midianites. Now this is while they're sitting and eating. They don't know this is going on. Then there passed by Midianites merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now, did Jesus stay dead? No, he resurrected. Just as Joseph didn't die in that pit, he was brought back out again. Okay? Good picture of the resurrection there. And Judah sees that he doesn't want to have to conceal the murder, right, of Joseph. Sees the Ishmaelites, and he's like, I got an idea. But some Midianite merchantmen come and pull him out of the pit, and they sell him to Potiphar in Egypt. And the brothers need to make something up in order to cover their own behinds, right? So let's read on. Verse 29, and Reuben returned into the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. And he returned unto his brethren and said, the child is not, and whither shall I go? He's worried about himself. And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, this have we found. Now, know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. It's like, duh, dude, of course it's the coat. And he knew it and said, it is my son's coat, and the evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I will go down to the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. So, they try and hide the truth that they were responsible for what happened to Joseph, right? Now, let's go to Matthew 28. Matthew 28. Mass place, I'll have you turn, and I'll be almost done here. Matthew 28. The last chapter of Matthew, and we see how the little lie that the Pharisees made up to confuse everybody. 28, verse 10. Verse 10. It says, and gave them for the potter's field, and the Lord appointed me. And Jesus stood before, oh, wrong one. Sorry about that. Right here. Then said Jesus unto them, this is after Jesus rose from the grave, and they're walking with them, be not afraid, go tell all my brethren that they go into Galilee, and there shall they see me. Now, when they were going, behold, some of the watch came into the city. Because remember, there was people guarding the tomb, and they fainted because of the angel with the eyes of lightning. They like became as dead men. That's earlier in this chapter. But for sake of time, we won't read the whole thing. Now, when they were going, behold, some of the watch came into the city and showed unto the chief priests all the things that were done, talking about what had happened to Jesus. These people claiming that they were seeing him. And when they were assembled with the elders and had taken counsel, they gave large money unto the soldiers, saying, say ye, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we slept. And if this come to the governor's ears, we will persuade him and secure you. So they took the money and did as they were taught. And this saying is commonly reported among the Jews until this day. So just like the brethren lied, the Jews lied. Why? Because what other excuse do they have? They don't want to believe that he rose from the dead, right? They don't want to believe that. So what do? They pay not like a couple of pennies to these officers. They pay them large money. Like, hey, you probably saw something crazy. Here's a good piece of money for you to just forget about that. And if it comes to the governor's ears, we'll make sure that you guys aren't implicated in this so you don't get your head taken off or something like that. Okay? So just as the brothers tried to hide the truth, the Pharisees tried to cover it up too. And here's the thing. Just as the brothers knew the truth about what went down, sort of, the Pharisees deep down wonder, did Jesus raise from the dead? Because he's not there. I don't really think his disciples would have taken him out of there. We remember him saying that he was going to raise from the dead on the third day. We heard that being rumored. Let's just pay these guys to shut up. Okay? That's what they did. Some of the watch, they came in the city. That's large money. So Joseph, what happened? Where does Christ go in the form of the gospel after he's resurrected? He goes up into the clouds, he ascends. What happens? The gospel spreads. It doesn't just stay in Jerusalem, it spreads, right? It spreads out in the whole world. Joseph goes into Egypt, was a picture of what? Spiritually? The world, typically. Which is a picture, the world. And he goes not to some nasty handler either, who's just like a slave owner. He goes to Potiphar. Potiphar is this big political figure who's got a nice place. It's secure here. There's guards. There's good food, good nutrition. He's not going to die of scurvy or anything like that. He's going to be well off in this guy's home, even though he is sold to him indenturedly. He's not going to die of disease. And it's just like the gospel that's put into the hands of what? Saved disciples. It is secure. It's not put into the hands of unfaithful people. That's not who spreads it. No, it's the people that are disciples. Those are the ones spreading the gospel. That's how it's made it here today, over 2,000 years, from faith to faith, because people are spreading it generation to generation. It is secure, not only by the preservation of God, preserving his word, but because we pass it on from person to person. Right. Salvation to salvation. Now, one more lesson from this, and then I'm done. 2 minutes. Why do children rebel like this? I mean, Jacob's not perfect. He, got 40 wives or whatever it is. That's a small number. That's conservative back then, right? No, he's got 4. 2 concubines. I don't know. It says he has wives. He's got the real ones. And he's got these other side chicks, But that's just the culture back then, right? Everybody didn't think that, you're so deep in sin, Dad. No, this was just a common in the culture, even though God does have a law against it, right? Even in the first chapters of Genesis, he says between a man and a wife, not a man and wives. No, a man and a wife. So, why do children rebel like this when they're raised in a good, godly home, right? You can do everything right. Everything right. You're perfect parents, even though no one is. Just my wife and I. No, we're not perfect either. We know it. Right, Annie? You know it. She tells me all the time. No, I'm just joking. We try our best. What are we doing? We're trying to raise our kids by the Bible. We're getting them to church. We're doing it what we're supposed to do aside from all the places that we mess up all the time. Okay? Or we think we do anyway. So why do kids just still decide to rebel like that? Is it just because they just want to, because they're sinful people? Because what's the thing that people want to do? Blame the parents, don't they? Oh, your kids are going off on the rails when they're older age and stuff like that. They're in their 20s, they left home, they're going crazy, and they just want to blame the parents. You did something. Who did that? Job's friends did that. No unsubstantiated claims. Well, something bad happened to you, so we know you did something wrong. Now something bad happens to you because you did something wrong owing up to it, all right? But just like Job, just like Joseph, what'd they do? Okay, how about these kids who rebelled? What did Jacob do to really make them just turn away their hearts from the family and hurt Joseph like this? It was their sin. It was their envy. That's what it was. Joseph wasn't just a big old bad spanker. He spanked too hard. You know how hard God can spank? Harder than me and harder than you. I can't destroy your finances. I can't burn your house down. I mean, I could, but that'd be arson. We don't do that around here. All right? I can't give you a disease. So, don't even go far with that. But, I can't come up with you with a needle. That's for missing church. What was in there? I don't know. I just swamp water. But here's the thing. I can't ruin you like God can ruin you, right? So to say like, I'm going to get on the spanking thing just for a sec. Like, oh, you spanked too hard, that's why the kids did that. No, hush. Spanking is required for child rearing in the Bible. Done deal right there. That is no just like, well, don't do it ever in this instance. No, it's always just a thing that happens. And you know what it does? It prepares the child, prepares the kid, prepares the teenager. You got spanked when you're 15, hey, stop being dumb, okay? But here's the thing, it's preparing you because God is someday just going to be your big authority in your life. Your parents won't be there anymore, and you'll know, hey, God doesn't just let things go. Just like my parents didn't let things go, God won't let things go. And you know what? God can send a wave of hell to you way worse than a paddle, okay? And they do it because they love you. And what happens with these kids? They're probably spanked, right? Jacob's kids. But what happens when you're spanked? You need to be exercised thereby in order to bear the peaceable fruits of righteousness. That's what discipline is supposed to do. And that's not the parents' fault for just doing what the Bible says. They decided not to bear peaceable. They didn't get exercised by it. That's what happens to kids. You can do it all right, do it all perfect, and they still just turn on you because people are wicked. Why Cain kill Abel? Okay? People are just wicked. That's all I got. That's all I got. God's not abusive. Parents aren't abusive. People just, spanking isn't abusive. It's just that kids just rebel sometimes. And that's all you got to bring it down to. It ain't the parents' fault unless it is like a really super abusive place, I don't know, like full of drunkenness and wickedness. Yeah, I can see that exception. But if you're bringing them to church and trying to do everything right, and they still rebel, that's their fault in their older age. And if you got kids right now and they're still like this, they just won't get it right or something like that in your home, yeah, that is your responsibility. But just remember, some kids are they got a will. And his name starts with a T, and he's got red hair. He's got a will on him. But you know what I believe? I believe even if someone messes up for 10 years, from the 20s through the 30s, they can still get right with God like I did. 10 years of my life down the toilet. And God still got a hold of me. That's all I have for you. Let's bow our heads and word of prayer.